So Tim Ross had a guest on, and they had a conversation about God, God's image, and theology generally, and within like a psychological perspective. And I'm okay with all of that. But there was a number of things in that conversation that seemed off to me, and questionable in regards to the way we do logic, the way we do theology, the way we do philosophical theology, and just like theology simply put. Because if you don't do it well, the applications you get from it are going to be bad, are going to be wrong. And so therefore, you're going to come up with a very obtuse theological view. Now, some of you guys don't know who Tim Ross is. And I don't have anything against Tim Ross. Let me just say that. I'm following him on Facebook or friends with him on Facebook. I'm not sure. But I've kept up sort of, not like in detail with some of the stuff he's put out. Mutual friend, Ruslan's on with Tim Ross. Tim Ross, I think, has been on Ruslan's channel. And they've had conversations. I've watched those. His podcast has taken off. It's doing really good, 345,000 subscribers. And part of the reason why I react to this sort of stuff is also because the amount of people that individuals have influence over. Look, if I ever get my channel to the thousands, the tens of thousands and the hundreds of thousands, and I say things that are questionable, or I bring on guests that are questionable, I'm very sure people are going to react to it. People are going to say, hey, what's going on? And they'll be in their complete right to. And if they're right about that, I would surely hope that I would either respond to that or, take it down or whatever like that. I mean, those things are important to me. Now, we're going to jump into this conversation. Tim asks a question. His guest, who I've never heard of before, but Dr. Cindy Trim. She has a ministry of her own, I think, from what I saw. I think she has a doctorate in education. And so it seems like a pretty vibrant ministry. Tim seems to be very fond of her and the way. So there's lots of like self-help stuff, I'm guessing, included in this. And again, the title of this video is Unlock Your Greatness with a Secret for Life Transformation. And look, I know how YouTube titles work, so I'll give quite a bit of grace there. But at the very least, I can say this interview's about something that has to do with how to transform your life, and your greatness, so on and so forth. I don't want to apply kind of theological categories to people, but I'm going to play the video. Tim's going to ask a question. Cindy's going to answer it. And then I'm going to come back into it and kind of try to bring about some clarification points that I think should be helpful, because the way the conversation goes, I think, is not very positive.
Please deconstruct for our audience this gross misconception that the church has given people, in my opinion, not to work on themselves. Because the Lord's going to do it all, and you just need to pray more. They try to just force them back into the system instead of, you need to go inside.
because you're talking about.
Okay, so I'm fine with the question. I think Tim is asking a very, very good question, an important question. There's quite a bit of Christians that kind of sit there and are lazy when it comes to working on ourselves and saying, look, being a follower of Jesus means also that I have to be self-reflective. I have to question what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, how do I change, how do I become better at X, Y, and Z, invest into my life, instead of just like praying and thinking it's going to go away or whatever like that. Well, look, there's a category of that within theology, and it's within, it's actually a subgenre of systematic theology called spiritual formation. And there's quite a bit of literature being written on spiritual formation. So I would say find some spiritual formation people that know theology well, that know philosophy well, that know psychology well, bring it together and help you develop as an individual. There is a category, and you'll have personal growth, you'll have spiritual growth, all of those things will come together. So I'm fine with the question. I'm fine with going after Christians who are like, well, we'll just like pray and it'll get fixed, it'll go away. I don't need to work on myself. God's got this, let go and let God kind of stuff. And even though there's quite a bit of truth in that. But the way she goes about answering this question is sort of where I have my problems.
About soul work, right?
Yes.
What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? So let's define what the soul is.
Please do.
And let's give people a couple of sound bites that they could work with, think about.
Yeah.
So the soul is not only the seat of your reflective consciousness, housing your mind, your will, your emotions. Your soul is the sanctuary of God. Where does it speak to you? It's not just your spirit.
Yeah.
You have to be able to digest revelation. And the revelation, the first law of revelation.
Okay, before we get into the first law of revelation, what is your soul? Look, I don't have an issue necessarily with the way she defined the soul. I mean, all the stuff she defined, it could have just been said, your soul is who you are. It's your immaterial self, right? Well, it's the sanctuary of God, correct, yourself. Like the passage she quoted, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world, but his soul, lose his soul, means what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose himself? That's what it means, right? So, for example, in some languages, including the Greek and the Hebrew in the Bible, souls, and in English too, but you refer to people as souls. So there were 250 souls there, 3,000 souls were saved. That just means people. And that's a completely fine definition because we are souls. We are embodied souls, meaning that we are personal agents. We have a rational aspect to ourselves. We have a creative aspect. All the stuff she mentioned, she just mentioned these categories. Again, that's fine. She's going to go into something about the first principle of revelation. I have no idea where this comes from. But whenever something comes up and I have no idea where it comes from, definitely I take it with, very large cup of tea.
Is that God will give you a revelation of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely correct.
And how does he do it? By introducing himself to you. So this is Moses. Moses said, do you know who I am?
So they're going to have a conversation about Moses and Moses' encounter with God. Now, she said the first principle of revelation is that God reveals him like you to yourself. Okay, that's fine. I'm even fine with saying, look, when people meet God, they are confronted with who they are. That's a completely fine thing. I don't know whether I would say it's a principle. It's something that happens. I think I see it with Isaiah. Isaiah goes before the throne of God, the glory of God. And then immediately he's aware of himself and his sinfulness. Woe to me, a man of unclean lips, who lives amongst the people of unclean lips, right? This awareness of his own sinfulness, awareness of his own kind of frailty and humanity before a holy God. And that's fine. But I don't think she goes in that direction.
And if I become this emancipator that you say that I am, if I become an emancipator, I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to be fought. And I've got a speech impediment. So you must not know about me. Right? You must not know about me.
Yeah.
Who do I say is affirming and endorsing me?
Wow.
Who do I say is sending me? He said, I am. Just tell him, I am. I am? Okay. So he stands before.
Okay, so this is good. Moses, God has questions. He doesn't want to go alone and all that stuff. And God says, look, tell them I am sent you. Tell the people that I am sent you, that I am. And this is important because God is doing something here. And specifically in the text of Exodus, the I am is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of their forefathers who's about to rescue them. It's not a statement made without any context around it. There's quite a bit of context as to who I am is. And you get that in the conversation with Pharaoh in the various conversations. But she's going to give us a different sort of conversation here.
Or Pharaoh. And Pharaoh probably, and I'll reenact it.
So she says this, and that's interesting. She says, so I'm going to reenact it. Well, I think the reason why she's reenacting it is because it's not in the text. I can't find it anywhere in the text. The conversations she's reenacting is not reenacting, she's enacting, right? I don't see it in the text. Y'all can go open up the book of Exodus, read it. and see if any kind of conversation like this happens or anything remotely close to this happens. I'm even okay with telling stories a certain way and paraphrasing, guys. I'm fine with that stuff. But I don't see it.
You got a nerve to come back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I raised you to be a prince.
That's right.
And you run away and you act like you're one of these,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah, for sure.
And so what are you coming back for?
Yeah.
He said, well, I'm coming back to free my people. So you're going to free the...
Now, again, this is the part where I don't really see in the text at all. So I'm here to free the people. Let my people go. And then this conversation.
You're the people, yeah. Who sent you? I am. So I am, meaning you sent yourself. So who's...
Okay, so this is definitely not in the text. Because who sent you? Well, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob sent me. Pharaoh doesn't go, oh, who sent you? Oh, I am sent you. Oh, so you sent you. No, because very clearly Pharaoh goes on to say that we want to go into the desert to worship our God. As a matter of fact, when you go into the text says, God is saying all this stuff before they go to Pharaoh. Pharaoh will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt and bring my hosts, my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt. By great acts of judgment, the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahweh, that I am God, I am the God. When I stretch my hand against the Egyptians, bring out the people of Israel from among them. Moses and Aaron did so. They did just as Yahweh commanded them. Now Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. Now, they spoke to Pharaoh. This is how old they are. It doesn't give us that, no, I am sent you and this sent you and that sent you. When Pharaoh says, prove to yourselves, this is God still talking. Yahweh says, when Pharaoh says, prove yourselves, do these things. Okay, do these acts. Verse 11, then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and sorcerers and the magicians of Egypt. Also, they did the same secret acts. Now, this goes into all the signs and acts and wonders and all that stuff that's happening. But very clearly in the text, God tells them to go tell Pharaoh, do these things so that they know I am God. As a matter of fact, if you flip into your Bible to Exodus chapter 7, verse 17, this is what they are saying. Okay, look at verse 16. And you shall say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews. This is God talking. The Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to you saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. But so far you have not obeyed. Thus, Yahweh, okay, thus says Yahweh, by this you shall know that I am the Lord. So Pharaoh has no confusion here. Moses is not obtuse in the way he's talking in regards to who is doing the acts, who is sending whom. Pharaoh's not sitting there saying, oh, so you're doing this? But I am as you? That's just not in the text. There's no way that you can be a fair reader of this text. Just read the text where you come to a conclusion like that. And again, I think she's reading this stuff in there because she's made up on her mind on a certain theological perspective, and she's trying to communicate that through the biblical text. And guys, you guys know I don't use this word lightly and just throw it around, but it's heresy, man. It's borderline heresy, if not full-on heresy. I think it's heresy. And I think people need to be careful. And frankly, we're going to see her ask a couple of questions to Tim Ross. And I think Tim agrees with it and Tim shouldn't. And I don't know whether he's being nice because she's a guest. He likes her, looks up to her or something like that. But if I was sitting in Tim's shoes, I would have said, well, hang on here. I got a couple of follow-up questions to this because what you're saying isn't really making a lot of sense. So check this out.
Who sent you? I did. So you're going to take them in the wilderness. Who's going to feed them? I am.
Yeah. That, again, the Lord is, because they're going to the wilderness to worship the Lord, the God of the Hebrews. That's what the text says. What she's saying is not in the Bible.
Who's going to clothe them? I am. Who's going to lead them? I am. I am is the name that God chose for himself. He created you in his image.
Okay, so it's actually I am that I am, or the Hebrew could suggest I will be that which I will be. And this has nothing to do with like us saying I am. This has to do with God's nature, in that God is the sort of thing that can't be defined by other things. That's why, because names are categories we place upon things and people and places. So, if there's a village next to a river and you call it the river village or the river town, that's a categorical connection they're going. So there's some logical sort of stuff happening there. And God actually is what the Israelites need in the desert, because, right, remember the cloud and the fire in the desert guides them, feeds them, gives them water to drink. God is their sustenance. And that's very important. And you can't just confuse this up by saying, well, I am. That's the name God gave because we say I am. And then this image of God stuff really gets too much. Okay? So.
And after his likeness. And the more you know about God, the more you know about yourself.
Okay, so here's the more you know about God, the more you know about yourself. Look, I'm okay with that statement. I'm okay with it in the sense that God's view of us helps us understand and interpret who we really are as humankind and as individual human beings. To take that anywhere beyond that is where I think it gets into heretical stuff, like we're sort of like gods. Like, now I know in certain segments, and I don't know Dr. Cindy, but in certain theological circles, this little God's doctrine is a sort of thing that regularly gets preached about, regularly gets talked about. And I think that's problematic because it's confusing to people. Generally, from what I've heard from people, they don't communicate it well, and they get into really, really bad territory theologically. And so people need to qualify themselves well. So check this out.
Created in the image after the likeness of God. So the first question you need to ask is, and I'm going to ask you.
Please do.
And
here are the series of logical questions that I really want us to focus on, because I think logic will save us here. Really. Because she's going to ask a couple of questions. If you just have good logical responses, the questions fall apart. You don't get to some weird conclusions. And yeah, so here are the questions.
And I want everybody to answer.
I will.
What's wrong with God?
Nothing is wrong with God. That's the question. What is wrong with God? Nothing is wrong with God. God is infinitely and eternally holy and just and good and all the omni attributes. So nothing's wrong with God.
Nothing.
So you were created in his image and after his likeness. What's wrong with you?
So you were created in his image and his likeness. So what's wrong with you? Well, plenty of things are wrong with me. For one, I'm not infinite and I'm not eternal. For another, I don't have all the omni attributes. For another is that I'm a sinful man, because when our parents, Adam and Eve, were created in the garden, though they were created in this place of moral innocence, they fell from that. And so therefore, theologians speak about this in language of the image of God has been marred upon humanity. So the image of God is not lost on us, but it has been marred. It's been damaged. This is proper, just theological language about image of God with human beings. So notice the logic here. So what's wrong with God? Nothing. But you're made in the image of God and likeness. What's wrong with you? What's Tim going to say? Tim should say, a lot of stuff are wrong about me. But he doesn't.
Nothing.
What's broken with God?
Nothing.
See, what's broken with God? Nothing. So what's broken with you?
You were created in his image after his likeness. What's broken with you?
Nothing.
So she's taking this idea of being in the image of God and likeness and equating it logically as a one-to-one correlation. And that's problematic, you guys. Because being in the image of God and in his likeness doesn't mean it's a one-to-one correlation with God. As a matter of fact, if you go to Psalm chapter 8, Psalm 8 is a commentary. Many theologians believe this. Psalm 8 is a commentary on Genesis 1, being made in the image and the likeness of God. So notice the language in Psalm 8. Let's read it. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, remember this is Genesis 1 language, which you have set in place. What is man that you are mindful of him? So what is man? That word for man is Enosh, right? Human beings. What is human beings that you are mindful of him? And the son of man, the son of Adam, that you care for him. Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings. That word for heavenly beings, right, is in the Septuagint translated as angels, but in the original is Elohim. You say the divine ones, but we'll just leave it at Elohim. You've made him a little lower than the heavenly beings. Well, now, look, if we're made in God's image and in his likeness, but we're still lower than Elohim, what does that mean? Well, that means we're not a one-to-one correlation. As a matter of fact, Psalm 8 explains what it means to be made in the image and likeness of God and a little lower than the Elohims. Here's what it is. And you crowned him with glory and honor. That's what it means to be in the image of God. You gave him dominion over the works of your hands. That's what it means to be in the image of God. You've put all things under his feet, sheep and oxen, beasts of the field, birds of the heavens, and the fish of the sea, where whatever passes along the paths of the sea. O Yahweh, our God, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Psalm 8 gives us a practical outlook on what it means to be made in the image of God. And it would frankly means to be made in the image of God in this passage. I'm not getting into the philosophical aspect or philosophical theology aspect of this, is to be priests under God's rule and reign. Because remember, in Genesis 1 and 2, God gives us the creation, the created order he's created, and has us reign over those things. So we become, you can say, underlords. We become priests under him. To say that being made in the image of God is the one-to-one correlation, as though Adam is God, and so therefore nothing's wrong with him. Clearly something is wrong with Adam. He sins. Clearly something is wrong with Eve. She sins. God doesn't sin. God is sinless. God cannot sin because he's the sort of thing that it's impossible for him by nature to sin. That's where she's missing it. And it leads into really, really bad places, you guys.
So everything you learned about yourself, you learned between 0 and 6.
Correct.
So she's giving this perspective of like, there's nothing wrong with us. And everything that's wrong with us is essentially like, has to do with our behavior and psychology. And that's not biblical. I wouldn't say that's a theological perspective to have. We are by nature, according to Ephesians 2, by nature, we are enemies of God, children of wrath, followers of Satan, under God's judgment and condemnation. Philippians 2 very clearly teaches this. What she's about to say in regards to what's wrong with us is extremely unbiblical.
From broken people who were created by a broken educational system and a broken society and broken government and broken families. So they taught you to consider yourself broken and that something is inherently wrong with you.
That's a big problem right there. They taught you that there's something inherently wrong with you. Well, there is. The Bible says we are enemies of God naturally. inherently, you can say, at least you can say inherently post-fall. Since the fall of humanity, we are enemies of God. So we're still in the image of God, but it's marred because we're sinners now, and we need to be redeemed. Thus, why Jesus came. I mean, Jesus didn't just come to teach us a bunch of good stuff. Jesus came to rescue us from being enemies of God. This is where the theology gets really, really suspect, guys.
Taught you. So if you learned it,
Yes.
you can unlearn it.
Yep.
So it's not
This is, by the way, this is like she's teaching like essentially salvation by just learning new information and being different. It seems to me that's what she's teaching.
something wrong with you.
Yep.
There's something wrong with your thinking. Unlearn it.
Listen to this.
They taught you. So if you learned it,
Yes.
you can unlearn it.
Yep.
So it's nothing wrong with you.
Yep.
There's something wrong with your thinking.
No, there is something wrong with us. Again, Ephesians 2 very clearly teaches this. And again, I don't know. I don't know why Tim doesn't respond to this stuff. I would suspect that Tim would know these things and know how to respond to these things.
And your strategy. So rather than you going to therapy for someone to fix you,
Right.
you go to therapy for them to fix your strategy.
Yes.
Because there's nothing wrong with self. There's only something wrong with your strategy. And we could fix a strategy.
Yeah, I just think that's wrong. Plainly, biblically speaking, that's just wrong. That there's nothing wrong with the self. There's everything wrong with the self, according to the Bible, right? Again, that doesn't mean we're not in the image of God. Even the most heinous, evil human being to walk the face of this planet, still made in the image of God, and so therefore is valuable just by that. But in the way we work out, in the way we live, in what we are enemies of God. And that needs to be changed. And we can't do that by ourselves. We can educate ourselves into infinity. Still wouldn't get that gap. Because we've sinned against God. Those sins need to be forgiven. Those sins need to be atoned for. Therefore, the atonement of God. These things all matter. And so again, it bothers me. Quite a bit it bothers me. That when we get these kinds of teachings and the categories aren't right, the logic is off. You don't get one-to-one correlations when God does things in regards to creating in his image and his likeness. Then you get people walking around saying, no, well, all I need to do is just be better educated and then everything will be good about myself. No. Education is good for you. You ought to be educated. But what's going to save you is Jesus' blood and sacrifice on your behalf. That's what's going to save you. And if you're not committed to that and you don't want that and you change that and you develop some kind of a different theology as to what we are by nature, when the Bible is very clear as to what we are by nature, you fall victim to coming up with a theology that is so off. It's not even just wrong. It stops being Christian. And that's my main problem with this.